Hey folks, this is another video in a series that aspires to teach Google Apps Script's DriveApp to beginners. In the previous lesson, we learned how to access all the files in Google Drive, as well as to construct a two-dimensional array so that we could use the data in additional work. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files module, where we will be adding a new script file. This lesson is going to be focusing on accessing folder files. So we're going to title it b underscore access underscore folder underscore files. We're going to hit enter. We'll change the name of our function to be called access capital F folders. We will save our project, go to line 2, hit enter, and add 2 slashes for a comment. So we're going to be constructing a development variable. So we're going to call this dev variable. I'm going to hit enter and tab. And we are going to declare a variable called folder underscore ID. And we're going to set that equal to an empty string. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we're going to enter in a semicolon. So the reason that we're establishing a development variable is because we might use this access folders function in other places. So in the event that you want to access multiple folders at one time, instead of having to rewrite this logic every single time, you can just use the function and have a single line of code. We're going to navigate back to line 1, and we're going to click between the parentheses. And we're going to enter in folder underscore ID in between those parentheses. We're going to hit the down arrow until we're on line 4 again. So when I develop an app script, I will create a development variable, which means that it is a placeholder for an argument that will be used in a function. So if we attempt to use folder ID as a variable in our script, it will not work because we do not have a folder ID. And thus, by creating a variable where we declare a single folder ID, we can develop our logic so that once the function is completed, we can use it in other environments and comment out the hard-coded folder ID so that we can have the dynamic argument input to our function. So we'll demonstrate that at the end of the video. But for now, we're going to want to have folder ID as a single argument for our function. And then we're going to want to have a variable called folder ID. And I would encourage you to mark it up as a development variable so that you remember that you need to remove it if you want your script or your function to be dynamic. So we're going to put our cursor in between the two single quotes on line 4, and we're going to return to our DriveApp. So I want to use this project folder here. So I'm going to double click on it. And then I am going to highlight the URL where I will find the folder ID at the end of the drive.google.com/drive/folders URL. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go back to my app script, and I'm going to paste that identification number in between the single quotes so that my folder ID variable has a folder ID to reference. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard twice. I'm going to hit enter twice. I'm going to hit the left arrow on my keyboard twice. I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment. We're going to begin developing our function's logic by opening the folder using its ID. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare a variable called folder. And we're going to set that equal to DriveApp.getFolderById. We're going to have an open parentheses. It takes one argument that needs to be structured as a string. So if you are hard coding a value using getFolderId, then it needs to be structured as a string, which is what we have for our folder ID variable. But because we've put our folder ID structured as a string assigned to the folder ID variable, we can just type folder underscore ID here, and that will do the same thing. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard and then add a semicolon, and then we're going to hit enter twice, left arrow twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will access the files within our folder. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to declare a variable called files, and we'll set that equal to folder.getF files with an open parentheses. We're going to hit our right arrow, add a semicolon. We're not passing any arguments into get files. This is very similar to when we got the files from DriveApp in the previous lesson. So we're going to hit enter twice. We're going to log it out. So we're going to do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in files. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We're going to add a semicolon. So when we run this function, you'll see that we get the file iterator variable again, which is the standard way that we access the get files or the get folders methods. We get an iterator back, which means that we need to loop through the iterator using a while loop. But as we did in the first lesson, we are going to create an empty array so that we can store those files so that we can leverage them in other places if we want to. So we are going to hit enter twice, left arrow 4 times, and then we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. We are going to create an empty array to store the files. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare a variable called array. And we're going to set that equal to square brackets. Now, additionally, we can add in an array into this array so that we have kind of an indication of what data points we're passing into our array. So we are going to be adding 3 values to this array. We will be wanting, so we're going to add in another set of square brackets here. So we have 1 set of square brackets, 2 set of square brackets, and then we're inside both square brackets. So we're going to add single quotes, and we're going to have a string that says file name, and then we are going to comma separate it, and then we're going to have another string that says file ID, and then we're going to have another string that says file URL. So that's what we're going to be looking to extract from our files so that we have names and IDs and a place to access it. And you know what? We're actually going to add another thing in there. We're going to also add in the file type. That way, if we just want to sort things by like spreadsheets or documents or decks or whatever, we have the ability to do so. So we're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard so that we're outside of our array variable, and we're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter twice, left arrow on our keyboard twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will use the while loop to access each file in our folders. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we are going to begin by typing in while with an open parentheses, and then we are going to reference that files variable from line 10, and we're going to use the dot has capital N next method. We'll have open parentheses. This is a Boolean value. We are not going to pass any arguments to it, which means that it defaults to true. Boolean means that you either have true, false, or null. In this case, we are not passing anything, so we are getting that true. So anytime there is something after the current file that we're on, the while loop will continue. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice. We're going to hit space, and we are going to open up a set of curly brackets. We're going to hit enter once, and we are going to add 2 slashes for a comment where we will create a file variable so that we can store each file temporarily in order to extract values from it. So we're going to declare a variable of file, and we'll set that equal to files.next open parentheses. We are not going to pass any arguments into next. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we are going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter once, 2 slashes for a comment where we will log out the results so that we have some transparency into what's happening. So we're going to do logger.log open parentheses, and we're going to pass in that file variable. We're going to hit the right arrow and add a semicolon. We're going to save our project, and then we're going to run it just so that we can kind of see where we're at. So you can see that we are returning our file iterator, which is coming from the logging on line 13. And then we are also logging out the file variable from our while loop, which is only giving us one result, which is DriveApp organizer. So when we use folder ID, when we use DriveApp.getFolderById, and then we use the getFiles method, we are only going to return files. So when I go back to my project folder, you can see that there is 5 folders in here and 1 file. So we are returning the files from this folder, which is why we are only getting the DriveApp organizer, which is what you see in our console here. So that's fine for now. But I just wanted to call that out, that when you are using files, you are only going to get files. Cool, so we're going to resume on line 23. We're going to hit enter twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, where we will create an empty array to store info about the files. So we'll hit enter and tab, and we will declare a variable called file capital A array, and we'll set that equal to square brackets. We'll hit the right arrow, and we'll add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter twice, and now we are going to add 2 slashes for a comment, 2 slashes for a comment, where we will push values to the file array. We're going to hit enter once, and then we're going to hit tab. I'm also going to close some of these shells because we don't need them anymore. Cool. So we are going to begin by using file array.push, and then we'll have an open parentheses where we will pass in file. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard once. We're going to hit space, 2 slashes for a comment, where we will say this is the name of the file. We're going to hit enter. We're going to do files capital A array.push. We'll do an open parentheses, and we'll reference that file variable again, and we're going to do .get capital ID with an open parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow twice, hit space, 2 slashes for a comment, and say ID. We're going to hit enter, and we'll do files array dot push open parentheses, and we'll do file dot get URL open parentheses, hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice, space, 2 slashes for a comment, and say the URL. And then finally, we're going to hit enter and say files array dot push open parentheses file dot get capital M MIME type open parentheses, hit the right arrow twice, space, 2 slashes for a comment, and say file type. So this will push each of these results into the file array. And my apologies, I have been referencing files array on these lines here, and I'm going to correct that because the name is file array. So we're going to delete that and clean that up a little bit. So make sure you're referencing file array.push. That is where we are going to be pushing the results, where they will become comma separated values. So the name will then be followed by a comma, and then the ID, followed by a comma, and then URL, followed by a comma, and then the file type. And they will be structured in this file array, so we have a one-dimensional array. We're going to resume on line 32 by hitting enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and then we're going to push the file array to the array variable. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do array.push open parentheses file array. And we will hit the right arrow and add a semicolon. So after those values become comma separated within an array, we are pushing that file array to our primary array up here. This array is 2-dimensional because it has 2 square brackets up here. And then the file arrays will be comma separated by being pushed into this 2-dimensional array. And that will give us a 2-dimensional array so that if we want to extract file names, IDs, URLs, and types, we have the ability to do so. And just a note on this array in here is optional. I thought it might be a little bit easier to see the output and to understand what each of the commas is correlated to. So you don't have to have this if you don't want it. It might be more annoying to have to filter it out if you're using this data somewhere else. So we are going to go to line 35. We're going to hit enter once, twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we'll log out the file array for visibility. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, file, capital A, array, right arrow, and semicolon. So now when it runs, we'll just kind of see the output of the file array before it is pushed into the array. So we're going to hit the down arrow on our keyboard once, and we're going to hit enter twice. Hit the left arrow on the keyboard twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will log out the array. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, array, with the right arrow on our keyboard and add a semicolon. We're going to save our project, and then we're going to hit run to make sure that everything is working the way that we want it to. So it looks great. So the first thing that we're getting is the logger from line 23. So we see, or my apologies, the first thing that we're getting is actually our file iterator, which is coming from line 13. So we logged out folder.getFiles as the files variable, and we got this file iterator. Then we went down a little bit, and on line 23, after we iterated through files using the while loop, and then we got the next file using the files.next method, we logged out our file variable, which gave us our name, which is DriveApp organizer. It then moved down to these lines here, where the file name, ID, URL, and file type were pushed into the file array. And that's the output that you're seeing here. So you can see that it's an array because it has an opening square bracket and a closing square bracket. And then you have a name, an ID, a URL, and a file type, all comma separated within that array. Finally, we pushed our file array into our empty array, which is on line 16, which is structured as a two-dimensional array. And we know it's a two-dimensional array because it has 2 square brackets at the beginning and 2 square brackets at the end. So the first array in our two-dimensional array is a list of headers, which you can see has appeared in our output here when we log the array. So we're getting that header row, and then you can see we're getting our second array, which is our file array, which is what we pushed into array. So we have successfully built out a function that takes a folder ID and produces a two-dimensional array as its output. So we're going to finalize this function on line 42. We're going to hit enter twice, hit the left arrow on your keyboard twice, and then we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, which is going to say return the two-dimensional array. Enter, tab, and we're going to type return array with a semicolon. We're going to scroll back up to the top of our script. We're going to open up our shelves here, and we are going to highlight line 4 and line 3, and we are going to comment out our development variable. I'm going to hit save, and then I'm going to hit run. You don't have to do this, but I just want you to see that we are now getting an invalid argument on line 7, and the reason for that is because the folder ID no longer exists. So we had this development variable here that was declaring the value for folder ID, which was an actual folder ID structured as a string, which allowed us to get that array. But what now happens is we can go to an empty code file like this, and I'm on line 2. We're going to hit enter, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we're going to test out our folder access function. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, full access folders. My apologies that I used the wrong name in the comment. We're going to have an open parentheses, and you can see it takes a single argument of folder ID. So we're going to go back to our project folder. And you can use the same ID if you want to. I guess that's what I'll do. So I'm just copying the folder ID from my URL. I'm going to enter it as a string. So I'm going to have single quotes. I'm going to paste it in. And when I hit run, you'll see that our function is now existing in a new file. So we have successfully created a function that allows us to access folders to extract all the files that exist within it.
I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to continue following along with this series, please check out the playlist linked in the description.